We're going to launch right into a tasting of Barrel Burner Chardonnay, and then I'm going to take a couple minutes to explain to you how environment influences wine. So we're going to talk about dirt, we're going to talk about climate, we're going to talk a little bit about precipitation and wind, and we're going to talk a little bit about sort of from a 10,000 foot perspective, how place influences wine. Why does wine, Pinot Noir from the Santa Rita Hills, taste different than wine growing in Tasmania or in Burgundy or in somewhere in Alsace? And so that's the goal today. So our goals again are taste a wine, figure out what's going on with the wine. Again, this is me teaching you guys how to taste wine, evaluate wine, have fun with wine. And in the end, it really doesn't matter how well you can describe a wine. In fact, some of my favorite times tasting wine is when no one's watching and I don't have to say a damn thing about the wine. I can just sit and enjoy it. So to even save time, I already put the corkscrew in this bad boy. There we go. Ready to go. So we've got Barrel Burner Chardonnay. I've been told to put my hand in back. That's proper internet product placement so the phone or the camera can get right on it. So this is our Barrel Burner Chardonnay. This wine was made by Clay Brock, Winemaker of the Year in Paso Robles in 2010. It's got a moderate 14.4% alcohol, and it was grown at the French Camp Vineyard in in Paso Robles Highlands District. And so what we're going to be doing is looking at this wine. The wine was picked at night at 24.5 degrees Brix. What's Brix? It's basically the percentage in weight of the sugar in the grapes when they were harvested to make the wine. So 24.5 Brix means that when we picked the grapes, the sugar content really in those grapes was 24.5%. And remember, what's so cool about wine grapes? Wine grapes have the highest concentration of disaccharide, meaning fermentable sugar, of any fruit on the planet Earth. So if you want the strongest booze in nature, you want to make the strongest alcoholic beverage on the planet, but you don't have a still, wine is your choice. Wine, you can take wine up to over 30% sugar if you dry the grapes out or allow them to hang on the vine for an extraordinary amount of time. And then you can take those raisined grapes and push pretty high alcohol. I think the world record for a mostly dry wine without any alcohol added was a 2015 Greenwich Creek Barossa Valley Grenache. And it was 18.5% alcohol by volume by a natural fermentation with a very, very strong yeast. Most yeast basically get drunk and die at around 14 to 15% alcohol. Of course, we're breeding these amazing yeast that stay alive a lot longer. I'm thinking we should make yeast that actually produce or get a little lazy in their alcohol production so we can pick a little riper, but we can make dry wines that have lower alcohol with a little bit of that riper flavor. But 14.4 alcohol for a Paso Robles Chardonnay? Wait, Paso Robles, isn't it too warm up there for Chardonnay? Well, I posted a couple of charts on my Facebook pages so you can kind of look where different varietals fit in different warmth and regions. And anywhere on that chart where there's dotted lines on the edges of the little bar for where Chardonnay belongs, remember those dotted lines mean that that is an open-ended study, that they have not determined that that is as cold or as hot, depending on which side it is, where Chardonnay can be grown. Chardonnay may actually be able to be grown in more regions than any other grape on the planet Earth. It's very, very, it's not all that discerning like Pinot Noir. You throw a Pinot Noir in Paso Robles, you are not going to end up with a good wine, unless maybe a couple places do a pretty good job with it, but it's mainly too hot. Paso Robles, though, especially Paso Robles Highlands District and the French Camp Vineyard, where this beautiful Barrel Burner Chardonnay was grown at our estate vineyard up in Paso Robles, the French Camp Vineyard, has very cold nights, very hot days. You may remember me saying a couple days ago that we have the highest diurnal shift of any American viticultural area. So that means on a normal day between April and October, where the grapes are waking up and doing their thing, Paso Robles Highlands District has 50 degrees, 50 degrees, between the daytime high and the nighttime low. So it's 100 during the day, you can expect 50 degrees at night. And that means the vines shut down, they shut their stomata, and they begin to basically go through a pattern where they're preparing themselves for a cold event. And that means they're no longer respiring acidity, and that's very important. Let's get down to this beautiful wine. Now, Chardonnay never, if you look at a Sauvignon Blanc or like we did on the first one of these little get-togethers, I remember that the Sauvignon Blanc had that really nice light straw color with almost like a platinum on the meniscus. Now, I've been trying my best. I'm going to show my hand in my notes, but you can see the color on that wine. We always look through incandescent light against a white background for color. I would say that's a nice medium gold color. And that's what we would expect from a young Chardonnay with maybe 2 years in bottle. Why? The oak actually does two things to increase the color. First of all, oak works like a tea bag. It adds color and flavor the longer we leave it in there. It also adds tannin. You can taste tannin in tea, especially if you oversteep it. Oak will also add, oak will add a little bit of color, but besides just the kind of like slight caramel color it would give, just like whiskey, right? We put whiskey into the barrel, it's basically crystal clear ethanol, and then it picks up that brown color. Real brown liquor comes from the color that is pulled out of the barrel during aging of that liquor. Same way, you put Chardonnay, which is quite light in color, in a barrel for a year or a year and a half, give it access to oak, and the oak is going to give it a little bit of color, but it's also going to help with a little, especially barrel fermentation and barrel aging, is going to give the wine a little bit of oxidation. And that oxidation is slowly going to give the wine a little more golden color. The older white wine is, the more color. So if I saw this color in Riesling, or if I saw this color in Sauvignon Blanc or Pinot Blanc, I would guess this wine is 8 to 12 years old. But in Chardonnay, it could easily be a young current vintage. So this is warmer climate Chardonnay. And I did actually leave on the chart that we're going to talk about in a little bit what to expect in a slightly warmer climate Chardonnay. We're going to move a little bit away from lighter, peachier, sort of apple-y character, and we're going to get a little more into the honey, fig, and highly tropical edge. Right away, it reminds me of vanilla creme brulee with a beautiful sort of desiccated pineapple on top. It has that beautiful kind of pineapple tropicality in the nose, but it does have quite a bit of oak. Although with a name like Barrel Burner and a label that kind of reminds you, yes, this wine had oak, I do find that the wine is pretty well balanced and is not over the top with oak at all. Although if you're looking for a little creme brulee and brown butter in the nose, I like to say this wine can bring people together, people who like sort of more Chablis, Merceau, white Burgundy. It's got the crispness and the brightness and the complexity. And then the folks that like Rombauer, big oaky, even though I think the oak's been coming down a little bit in current years, big kind of a marshmallow of a wine, easy to drink, lots of oak, really rich, very stylistic. I think this wine kind of is, without being Muzak and just trying to piss off no one but excite no one, this wine really has some very exciting edges to it. And we do, if you ever go over to the Royal Hawaiian in Waikiki, that's probably our #1 account with this wine, and they sell the heck out of this, like palette layers almost every day. So that's what I love about the wine too. So a little tropical, a little oaky, a little brown butter, little kind of baked apple meets tropical character, maybe a little bit of a guava essence, a little bit of that, like I said, pineapple almost always comes out in Central Coast Chardonnays. Now it's day drinking with Wes. All right. So, wow, the wine's very dry. There's no residual sugar to this wine whatsoever. My guess, just on my palate, I'm pretty sensitive to it. Somewhere under or just about 2 to 2.5 grams. So bone effing dry. That would be the technical term for it. Very, very dry, very expressive. Carolyn, crisp and bright. So I start thinking about food. I start thinking about fried chicken. I start thinking about anything with butter. We've been eating, at least my wife has, and I've been making it for her because it's a very simple thing for her to snack on, and she really likes the crunchiness, is popcorn. So popcorn, you can do anything with popcorn in wine. Whatever you smell in the wine, get a little butter, get a little tropicality. You like spicy, spice it up, butter it up. Put in whatever you want. Chocolate. I love to melt butter and maybe some Werther's candies on top, and then stir that up. If we're gonna do like a caramel corn or a kettle corn type of thing, so that'll work beautifully. So I would say hot buttered popcorn with a little bit of seasoned salt would be absolutely gorgeous with this wine, would show absolutely beautifully. So again, this wine just landed 92 points in the tasting panel. It's usually a $15 wine on the shelves, and there is a promo code. If you go to millerfamilywine.com, this is the 30 seconds of commercial that you'll get in at the beginning and at the end. 30 seconds of commercial. This wine is on sale for $7.50 a bottle with 1 cent shipping per case. Yesterday I said 1 cent shipping for as many bottles as you want. No, it's actually 1 cent per case. There's probably some law that makes us do that, but it's still a pretty darn good thing. 10 cases, 10 cents to ship. So if you need some good Chardonnay in your cellar right now or in your back room waiting to take care of you if you need it, $7.50 for a 92-point Chardonnay, and it is darn good. I think you really will enjoy it. People who like good acidity and minerality. It doesn't have the minerals of a Santa Maria Valley or a Biendecido or Solomon Hills, Clos Pepe, or something like that, but it certainly has some really beautiful character. And I don't think for a sub $10 bottle of wine, for a sub $20 bottle of wine, I'd be very happy at a $20 glass pour for exactly what's in my glass. All right. Quickly bring me a flagon of wine so I may wet my brain and say something clever. Wine, unless maybe 1 out of 200 berries might ferment in the berry before it's either eaten or raisins and falls off the vine or just sits there as a mummified cluster up in there. So let's get on with it. Let's talk a little bit about the basics of climate. And the first thing I want to introduce you guys to is this idea of the Winkler scale. And the Winkler scale was developed by Professor Winkler up at UC Davis. And this was in post-Prohibition California. Between the 30s and the 70s, UC Davis was really the driving force of New World wine information. And it was really cool to understand and study this stuff because what was the advantage of Davis? While France and every place else in the world outside of the United States did not have the 19th Amendment, the Volstead Act, Prohibition. During Prohibition, while we weren't making wine and we were taking a break from making wine, mostly, we were still making some wine. In France, Italy, Germany, they were all using the traditional anecdotal styles of making wine. And if you've gone to Davis and you've studied wine, one of the most frustrating things about being a wine scientist is you come up with all these great new ideas and all this great new research and everybody ignores it. Because I learned to make Pinot Noir the way Brian Babcock taught me how to make Pinot Noir. And how do I make Pinot Noir today? The way Brian Babcock taught me how to make wine back in 1996. So winemaking is anecdotal, and we love to ignore science. And even as much as I love science and as much as I love rationality and all that stuff, I admit sometimes I don't look at the newest scientific literature. I make wine from the seat of my pants the way that I was taught. But at Davis, Winkler and Amorine, these guys were reinventing wine growing, and they were reinventing winemaking. How? They lost the anecdotal, multi-generational winemaking vibe. There was almost a full generation that stopped making commercial wine in the United States. So freed from the rumors, freed from the anecdote, freed from the multi-generational, passing along of winemaking knowledge, we reinvented winemaking to the point where we did such a good job cleaning wine and getting wine to be expressive and clean to a certain extent. Some people got a little turned off by California wine for a while. You can still hear some people believe this today, that our wines are too clean. They're too modern. They've lost some type of rusticity or soul. Well, if that's true, then why seems like when I was in the 90s, we would send our California winemakers over to France to learn how to make wine and then have them come back and integrate those cultural practices in the winery and the viticulture in the vineyard. Now, I think the opposite is true. I hear much more commonly people from Burgundy coming to the Santa Rita Hills, Santa Maria Valley to learn what we're doing. They want to see the ozone machine. They want to see the reverse osmosis. They want to see the cross-flow filtration. They want to see the bells and the whistles that are making our wines beautiful, clean, fresh, and fruity for the international market. Now, does that mean all wines are becoming homogenized? Maybe a little bit, but certainly, if you want to drink natural wine, you can find people that'll make you natural wine for the good and for the bad. And, if you want to drink, very, very beautifully clean wines, there's those wines. If you want to drink wines from modern winemakers who use have a little rusticity to them, there's those wines as well. But today we're talking about climate. So the climate regions, I started with Amrin. So you basically have region 1, region 2, region 3, region 4, region 5. Region 1 is very, very cool. It's basically about 1800 degree days, so it's just kind of on the edge of ripeness. Think about the cooler regions of Germany. Think about the Sonoma Coast. Think about the Santa Maria Valley. Think about the Santa Rita Hills. These are all region 1. So you can grow Champagne, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier. You can probably grow some Pinot Blanc or some Pinot Gris. Might be able to grow some Syrah in a warm year, but it might not get ripe until December. Or if we have warm vintages like 15, 16, 17, you can get Syrah coming in September or early October in the Santa Rita Hills. So that kind of gives you an idea, region 1. And then they break up region 1 into A and B, but we don't have to get into that. Region 2, good examples would be like Ballard Canyon, Bordeaux, Piedmont, or the Loire. So I like to call region 2s and 3s, it's kind of a marginal climate. So I would say in that whole kind of like marginal climate, you would get, in region 2, you would start seeing Grenache and Syrah, and you would obviously see Cabernet Sauvignon, white Rhones, the Loire, so all things to all people. I like to say Santa Barbara is to California like the Loire is to France, in the sense that some of the greatest wines in the world are grown. Oh, David Ramey, by the way. Yeah, and David, if the quality's bad, go over to J. Wilkes Wine Santa Barbara, and that's where the feed is originating. And by the way, your Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs were some of the first that really turned me on. David Ramey's really turned me on to what wine could be when I was a young man, and I was drinking those wines probably before it was legal for me to be drinking wine. It's a beautiful thing, so thank you. So we're talking about regions, we're talking about wine. So the Loire Valley grows great Chenin Blanc. I think Chenin Blanc is just perfectly suited for a Winkler region 2. And then if we move to the region 3, we're talking about the Northern Rhone, Hermitage, those areas. Margaret River in Australia, which is funny because the Margaret River to me means cool climate Australia. There's like Australia, and then there's the Margaret River. It's almost like two totally separate continents to me. But the Margaret River is actually significantly cooler than a lot of other places. And the cool climate viticulture in Australia is region 3, so that lets you know. And they make absolutely fantastic Chardonnay and Cabernet out there in the Margaret River. The Russian River near Sebastopol. So Sebastopol would be more like region 3, and if you get out sort of Santa Rosa, where if you go out there and you don't bring me a case of Pliny, you're in trouble. Out by Santa Rosa, you would get more into the high region 2, low region 3. And then we go into region 4, Napa Valley floor. So some of the mountain regions and the cooler regions of Napa that have a little more influence from the ocean and that diurnal effect between the canyons and the mountains. You could be in region 3, but a lot of Napa is in region 4. Stellenbosch in South Africa is also region 4. So, making great Cabernet, making great Sauvignon Blanc, but not cool climate Sauvignon Blanc, that's for sure. Tuscany is also considered region 4. So these are regions that really use hot grapes. Now, if you're curious about what grape belongs where in these regions, I posted a really nice chart that was revised in 2012 that shows every grape that you can probably think of, probably the top 20 grapes in the world, and where they fit along, all the way from I think Riesling's at the top and I think Tempranillo's at the bottom, and that basically is how it runs. So if you want to know kind of what kind of region and how much heat is required to get these grapes right, that's how you can find out. Welcome Cody and welcome Brian. I'm going to can we ship to North Dakota? We actually do quite a bit of business in North Dakota. If you do actually head up to Fargo, almost every wine shop will have this wine in it because I go to Fargo 3 times a year for some odd reason. What's that? Oh, you can't go to a wine shop. Check out the website. It'll tell you if we can ship to North Dakota. If we can't, that would be a shame, wouldn't it? Because it seems like they need all the love they can right now. It's cold and everything else. Oh, and Janet has many of the family members watching. Hopefully some of those are some of the ones I met at Cafe Blue in Boulder. Found out one of my best friends lives in Boulder. So next time we're at Boulder, I can put another 10 people at a winemaker dinner. So that's great. That's great. And Kelly says what they just poured a glass of cab for her son, who is Jeff's doppelganger. Thank you, Jeff's doppelganger. I appreciate you letting me borrow the legacy of this brand so I can continue making some delicious wines. And there's Tom O'Higgins and Jan and Mark. Oh, Marcus and Christy. Oh, Marcus is saying that he sells Wes's wines in North Dakota, Fargo, and Bismarck. Marcus Hansen can help, so you can ask him a little bit later. Awesome. Oh, by the way, I just drank my last. I'm going to drink my final choice pills from Castle Danger, my favorite beer in Minnesota, tonight. So, Marcus, when the weather looks good, send me more beer. Awesome. And then Carolyn, Blue in Boulder. Found out one of my best friends lives in Boulder. So next time we're at Boulder, I can put another 10 people at a winemaker dinner. So that's great. That's great. And Kelly says what they just poured a glass of cab for her son, who is Jeff's doppelganger. Thank you, Jeff's doppelganger. I appreciate you letting me borrow the legacy of this brand so I can continue making some delicious wines. And there's Tom O'Higgins and Jan and Mark. Oh, Marcus and Christy. Oh, Marcus is saying that he sells Wes's wines in North Dakota, Fargo, and Bismarck. Marcus Hansen can help, so you can ask him a little bit later. Awesome. Oh, by the way, I just drank my last. I'm going to drink my final choice pills from Castle Danger, my favorite beer in Minnesota, tonight. So, Marcus, when the weather looks good, send me more beer. Awesome. And then Carolyn is saying on my page that she can help with shipping as well. She worked in our tasting room for a good long time. Awesome. So let's go on. So we've talked about all four kind of regions and how much heat it takes to get each grape ripened. So, basically from there, I want to talk a little bit about sun, temperature average, temperature extremes, rainfall, and wind. And then we'll talk a little bit about soil, and then we'll call it a night because I'm going to eat some food that I haven't eaten in a really long time tonight, and we've been cooking and eating everything we can. That's really good, but I'm going to be pushing the limits of my ability to balance my insulin tonight. So it'll be lots of fun. And if you hear a groaning, that would be Miss Kestrel. Hi, Kes. You want to come up and say hi to everybody? Can you pause up? Hey, Kes. Hey, Kes. Can you pause up? Oh, okay.
Let's play.
She does want to play. Let's get going. I'll bring all our little parents. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I get you? Oh, there's about 150 people right now who are saying, "What are you doing to that poor dog?" There we go. Say hi to the Harleys. Hello, Harleys. Hello, everyone else. Hello, North Dakota. Stay away from wood chippers. That would be important. All right. You ready, Peregrine? Okay, I'll put you down a little bit easier. All right, so sunlight. Sunlight is obviously very important. Galileo said wine is sunlight held together by water, and sun is the engine for producing both carbohydrates for growth in a grapevine and for producing sugar in the grapes. So a grapevine has two different physiological lives. At the beginning of the year, it uses sunlight to produce carbohydrates, to produce basically cells and growth. So as soon as that grapevine grows up and recognizes it has about 12 to 15 leaves per cluster, it stops producing carbohydrate, shuts down, and a different sort of process starts happening, and it goes from the vegetative growth cycle to the fruit ripening cycle. So once it's done growing, it stops growing and starts producing sugar. Why would it produce sugar? Why was sun turning into sugar? To entice animals to eat the fruit. And that's another part of the story that we'll tell at some point. But sugar and deliciousness in grapes is the mechanism that grapevines use to disperse their seeds. The seeds of a grape don't fly away. They can't float to a different part. It's not like blowing and everything kind of goes. The grapes need to get into the gut of an animal and be dropped off in a different part of the forest. So sunlight produces that sugar. Sugar attracts animals, and it's the sugar, which is a byproduct of photosynthesis and a byproduct of the vine's physiology, that we exploit by turning into ethanol and alcohol. So when we drink wine, it makes us feel good. Sunlight also has an impact at different elevations. At sea level, sunlight has a different sort of photosynthetic capacity than grapes at 3,000 feet or 5,000 feet in elevation. Elevated sunlight has a more intense effect on the vine, and can actually have an impact. So mountain grapes, you can talk about the soils on the mountain, the precipitation, the windfall patterns, lack of frost, but what's also important is sun at elevation does have a different impact and can impact a wine's quality and flavor. I did mention the one chart that showed what grapes belong in what climate. There's also another chart that shows how different climates impact the flavor of all those grapes. And I'm not going to read those charts to you. I suggest you are intelligent enough to go and check out those charts and glean from them what you can. Average temperature dictates what grapes you can grow in a region. So the average temperatures, as they're averaged over a number of different years, that's where we get those degree day charts, and that's where we find out, all right, we're in the Santa Rita Hills. This is how much heat we have in a given period of time. 10-year average, 2,000 degree days, perfect for Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and maybe cool climate Syrah. So that's what we're going to grow. Now, the next thing we have to look is temperature extremes, because if it frosts 30 times a spring, there's no reason to grow grapes there. If it gets up to 110, 115 degrees, you're going to get sunburn, stomatal closure, vines that are very, very unhappy, unless you're, growing Tempranillo and Cabernet and Paso Robles, and those vines will be used to 110 degrees. Now, if it got 110 degrees for 20 days on average during the growing season in the Santa Rita Hills, it would be very difficult to harvest and produce fresh, bright, and primary Pinot Noir that didn't taste like stewed prunes and tomatoes. So you got to really be careful about the extremes. Not only the average, but you also have to look at the extremes. How many frost days? And also, weather extremes can also include heavy rain, heavy frost, heavy hail. Hail decimates young vineyards. When a vineyard starts growing, because grapevines grow every year, and then all that stuff kind of, becomes dormant, and then it starts all over the next year. So because the grapevine's job is to grow up a tree. Rainfall, very important. So the average rainfall in the grapevine in Vitis vinifera or Vitis sylvestris, it's all basically the same sort of genetic mutation. We're talking about the area between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, the highlands of Anatolia and Turkey, and Iran. In this area, which is the cradle of wine civilization, is where the first domestication event of the grapevine occurred, 25 to 30 inches of rainfall per year on average. So when people say, hey, can I dry farm, my grapes? I say, there's two things I need to know. How much rainfall do you get per year, and how much clay is in your soil? And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about next is soil type. So if you have clay soils, clay does two kind of magic things. Clay exchanges nutrients. Clay has a positive ionic charge. So basically, when a grapevine wants to uptake nutrients, it has to have a clay particle so it buffers the nutrient and can absorb through the roots. No clay, no nutrients. If you try to grow grapes in pure playground sand, you're not going to have a good time. You have to have little bits of silt and a little bit of clay, a little bit of loam. All these things are really important. So clay does those two magic things. It exchanges, it buffers, and it's called cation exchange capacity. So cation exchange capacity is a big, fancy $12 word that just says clay helps a grapevine absorb nutrients. Okay, that's very important. So the higher the clay content, probably the more vigorous the vine will be. Second thing is clay holds water better than any other soil type. So if you've ever stepped into a heavy clay soil after a rain, your boot goes in and your foot comes out and the boot stays down there. You're lucky if you get it back. It's sticky and it holds water. Sometimes you walk over clay soil that looks like it's dry and you'll crack through it and go right into all the water and the guck underneath, the crust on top. That's how soil rolls. So if you have heavy clay soil and you get 15 inches of rain every year, that might be plenty to dry farm and never have any added supplemental irrigation in your vineyard. So the opposite of clay would be sand. Sand has the largest, silt is the smallest. We'll talk about silt. Then clay has the second smallest, and then sand. Sand has the largest grain of any soil type. So sand, clay, silt. Sand has no cation exchange capacity and no pure ability. It's basically just weathered quartz. So how is even soil made? So soil's made by the weathering of geological parent material at elevation. And then as it becomes alluvial and comes down these elevation into valley areas, everything that's broken down off the dirt and the rocks on a mountain becomes alluvial and goes down into the valley. That's why valleys are always the best places to grow vegetables for high yield. And that's why when another quick wine story would be when the Romans would come in and conquer any area in Europe, they would take the alluvial areas between the mountains and they would grow grain, they would grow road vegetables, they would grow food crops, and then up on these rocky hillsides where they couldn't really grow the same type of grains and vegetables that they could on the lower, richer alluvial soils. If you grow grapes on alluvial soils, they go nuts and they produce really poor wine. But what the Romans figured out is olive trees and grapevines. And this was before wire. So they would plant one olive tree, a couple grapevines in between, and another olive tree, and then they would basically do everything they could to use the olive trees as a support mechanism for the vines in between. So the olive trees spaced out were sort of like the stakes in a vineyard, and then they would run those. But they would run those really only on these rocky hillsides because the rocky hillsides had poorer soil, and the poorer soil and the more complex soil would make the vines grow smaller clusters, smaller berries, and would generally produce more intensely colored and intensely flavored wine that would be able to be sold at a much higher price at market. And then we've got silt. So silt is the smallest. Silt is kind of what you see after a rain. It's like kind of like that dark stuff you see on the very top of the soil because it's the finest molecule, the finest grain of any soil type. So it's gonna end up in a rain event being at the very, very top. It's like that. If you go down into like a flood control and you see that thin layer of really, really, really kind of almost creamy soil, that's silt. And then you've got the Holy Grail. The Holy Grail is loam. So loam is a mixture of the three soil types I just said. So it's a mixture of sand, clay, and silt. And loams represent the greatest agricultural soils in the world. And good luck finding a wine grown anywhere in the world over $50 that was not grown on some type of sandy loam or clay loam soil. Silt loam soils are not quite as popular, but there you go. So we've talked about soil, we've talked about climate, sun, temperature, rainfall, and wind. And the way that I sort of want to finish and bring this all together is explain what we mean when we talk about the different types of climate. So I want to talk about really quick macroclimate, mesoclimate, topoclimate, and microclimate, because they all mean things you might not understand. So start with macro. So macroclimate is like California. Macroclimate would, if we want to even go further, macroclimate would be the United States of America, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal. Macroclimate may be the Iberian Peninsula, and then topoclimate could be Spain or Portugal. I would say California is as big as a country, so let's call California our macroclimate. Then let's go to topo. Topoclimate, I would say, would be somewhere in the area of Santa Barbara County. So Santa Barbara County is our topoclimate, although that's very, very diverse. Region 1 to Region 4 in a 30-mile climate. It's the most diverse wine-growing region in the world in a 30-mile climate, with over 70 different grapes within that 30-mile climate. Unbelievable diversity, which isn't the best thing to market, but it's still beautiful. Topoclimate would be the vineyard. So now we're saying, you can even say, mesoclimate, you could say is Santa Maria Valley. Topo you could take down to a AVA. Santa Barbara might be too wide. So let's go with the mesoclimate, macro being California, meso being Santa Rita Hills, and then let's go topo would be Clopepe, or meso would be Bien Nacido, topo meso would be Santa Maria Valley, topo would be Bien Nacido. So maybe topo would be better understood on a vineyard by vineyard basis. And then the term everyone uses incorrectly is microclimate, because about 20 years ago at UC Davis and at Cal State Fresno, they officially changed the definition of microclimate to define one vine's canopy at fruit level. think about that, because that is all that really matters. I don't care what the temperature is up in the sky. I don't care what the temperature is down in the dirt. What really matters to the vines developing character and flavor and getting rid of the vegetal aromas and increasing the high-tone fruit flavors and the complexity and the floral characters of wine, we care about how much sun, how much fruit is going on at the level where the fruit actually is. What the fruit really cares about is how much sun flecking, how much wind, what's really happening at that fruit level. So I want you to start thinking about microclimate as one vine's canopy at fruit level. So we've got, again, macro, meso, topo, and micro. And I'm a little confused because I've never used topo climate before. But again, I did some reading up for the prep for this wonderful conversation. And I thought that filled in a really nice gap. Sort of country or state, down to wine region, down to vineyard, down to one single vine, and that. Because really, I mean, if every, the hobgoblin of incredible viticulture is consistency. So if you can have consistent leaf pulling throughout your vineyard, if you can have consistent leaf to cluster ratio of 12 to 15 throughout your vineyard, if you can have consistent numbers of clusters per leaf, all of that stuff, it really, really matters. And that's why it's a little difficult to start thinking about this, as every vine in the vineyard has its own microclimate. But that's sort of what Dr. Richard Smart and his book, Sunlight into Wine, did to revolutionize canopy management throughout the world. And I like to say Dr. Richard Smart and his book, Sunlight into Wine, did for viticulture what Louis Pasteur and his fermentation books did for germ theory, the development of fermentation science, and as a side effect, modern medicine, because germ theory, not a bad side effect. Okay, well, gosh, that was a lot of information. So again, check out those charts, because the charts have a lot of information, a lot of really good stuff. Oh, Barbara Satterfield, who helps run Santa Rita Hills Wine Growers, actually does run Santa Rita Hills Wine Growers, just opened a 2014 Clos Pepe Pinot Noir. Wonderful. And Eric Christensen, I went to high school with him. All these people. Vincent, hello, everybody. So lovely. And Steve jumped in. That's awesome. So I gave you guys a little bit of information about how environment influences wine. Did I miss anything? Sun, temperature, rainfall, wind, soil, climate region, the viticulture, the environment. Again, next time we're going to talk about cultural practice and what humans do to tweak the environment to make perfect wine. So if you guys, but before you guys take off, I am going to pour another little bit of this delicious barrel burner Chardonnay. And I definitely recommend all of you go and make a run at your local liquor store for as much wine as they possibly have, because everyone in wine right now needs all the business in the world. But again, we are having an amazing, amazing sale on these barrel burner wines. So if you do go to MillerFamilyWines.com and put in the promo code MW50, like Master of Wine 50, MW50, and you look at the prices of these wines. Not only is the barrel burner Chardonnay, but we're going to do the barrel burner Cabernet, I think, tomorrow, because I'm kind of in a cab mood. And then we'll also you can also look. There's a flyer way down on my page that shows, I think there's 8 or 9 wines right now that are on incredible sale. So I definitely recommend you going through there. I think we sold something around 30 to 40 cases just in yesterday's broadcast. So thank you so much. I mean, I think the nice thing that you've shown me and my boss and everybody else in the Miller Family Wine Company and here at the Miller Family Wine School is that not only is this a great way to connect, to have a moment where we can relax and have a drink, celebrate life's moments, like turning 51 and being stoked at least to have a little hair left. And also to recognize and realize that we need to realize we are going to be together again soon. We are going to be with friends and family, and buying a little bit of wine. There's not a lot of things you can do this. I mean, if you buy 100 rolls of toilet paper, that's great. But what is it going to do for you after this is all over and we're back together with our friends and family, spending more and more time together with larger groups of people? People might see that you had 30 rolls of leftover toilet paper and go, oh, you were one of those guys. Yeah, thanks. But if you think about wine, if we end up being sort of in seclusion for a little longer than we feel, we've got as much wine as we need. So we're stoked. But if we end up using science and rationality and all the wonderful human tools that we have to nip this thing in the bud and get back out there, having extra wine, this wine will go 6 to 7 years in the cellar without any problem. So as long as you can drink a little bit of wine all the time, I think you're going to be fine. So do consider, if you're going to hoard something, wine is a great thing, because not only is it good now, but it'll be good after all this madness is over.